It costs more to put a roof over your head. It costs more for childcare, to pay your bills, educate your kids, and we're being paid less. Will the Job Summit deliver anything? Welcome to Q&A. Thank you for that welcome. I'm Stan Grant. We'll get to your questions on the Job Summit, on whether the rich should get a tax cut, and a mining exploration company that's left a lot of people out of pocket and feeling a bit angry. We're going to give you some answers as well. Here to answer those questions, world-renowned philosopher and author A.C. Grayling, entrepreneur and business owner Wendy El-Khoury, agribusiness leader Marriott, Shadow Assistant Treasurer and Shadow Minister for Financial Services, Stuart, and from Canberra, Minister for Finance, Katy Gallagher, who's been at the Job Summit today. Make them welcome. Hang around as well, because we've got a little treat for you at the end of the program. We're going to bring you a performance from the Hoodoo Gurus. Who wants to hear from the Hoodoo Gurus? Yeah? So do I. And you can live stream us around the country as well on iView, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Quanda, as usual, is the hashtag, so please get involved. Let's get started tonight. Here's Cass Swaby.
I'm a mum of two and work full-time in the public service. It's my experience that lack of affordable childcare prevents many Australians from working as much as they would like to and participating fully in the economy. What might be done to address this as a matter of urgency to unlock a highly skilled and available workforce?
Katy, this has been front and centre today, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had the summit kick off with a panel around women's economic equality and equal pay, and other issues obviously have come up around that session, but early education and care for children under school age was certainly a major issue that was raised, and is really part behind the reason that we made an election commitment to invest an additional $5 billion into early education and care to make sure that childcare is more affordable for families as they're juggling those, really difficult times when you've got young kids and you're trying to work and you're trying to meet all your bills and things like that. We get that we need to make it more affordable, and I think you'll see that in the October budget when we make that investment. We think it's good economic reform, it's not social policy, and we need to make sure that families are able to work if they want to, but also have their kids in really high quality early education and care settings as well. And at the moment it's unaffordable, it's difficult to access, and we're trying to address that.
People want more though, don't they? They want more change right now. Can they wait until next July for the subsidies? Why wouldn't you bring the subsidies forward?
Yeah, well, Stan, this has been raised. We made a commitment, it's $5 billion. I think at the time we were criticised for it being too excessive and something that we couldn't afford. We think as a country it is affordable and it is essential that we do this, but we're also trying to balance a pretty, budget under a lot of stress at the moment, and bringing it forward had a cost of around $900 million at the moment, as we're working through the budget.
Sorry, Katy, can I just come in there? You've made a choice though, haven't you? You're having to make choices about priorities, and the priority right now is to wait on bringing down the subsidy. The question is, if you say it's not social policy, it's economic policy, why not do it now? Because we know that getting more women into the workforce is going to improve the bottom line of our economy.
Yes, and certainly the modelling that we had that underpinned our policy proves that, you spend $1 on access to early education and care, you get more than that back in terms of economic dividend. But we do have to implement the systems to administer this program as well. And we think the best opportunity to do that is to have that investment made in the October budget, but commencing in July. And that is, it is big change. It's another big additional investment into early education and care, but there's other things we need to be doing about ensuring women are able to participate for the hours that they want in the labour market. This has been a big focus of the summit today. 50% of the summit were women. We had women leaders leading some of those economic debates, and it is certainly about access to childcare, but it's also about making sure that we're dealing with some of the other barriers that affect women in work, including safety and respect at work, and dealing with those that are going to make sure that we can access all of that talent that's sitting there at the moment and that we're in dire need of, and getting it into our labour market.
When do you deal with this? Do you deal with the reality of this with children running a business? Does anything you've heard from Katy satisfy you?
It does to a point. I think that, knowing that there's a shortage of labour right now in the childcare sector, there's 6,500 jobs currently available. It will be 9,500 next year. And that's a concern for working mothers, because we know that women are leaving childcare education in droves for the reason that they also are not being paid adequately. There is a lot of pressure on them to work in that environment. And on top of that, during COVID, during last year, particularly in the pandemic, we had 116,000 women out of work as a result of not having care available. Now, as a working woman and as many women who run their own businesses in small business, we work around the clock. And we need to be able to have not only affordable care, but we also need it to be flexible. And that's something that a lot of women have shared with me too, because everyone talks about flexible working hours and flexible commitments. Where is the childcare that aligns with that?
Kaz, can I go back to you? You have two children, 6 and 7. How are you dealing with it at the moment?
I would say that every professional success I've had has come down to the quality of childcare that I've been able to access. I certainly wouldn't have achieved the things that I have professionally without that, so it's been critical.
And it affects the life choices you make as well. Would you have another child, for instance, right now, given what you're having to deal with?
That's something that I don't think that we could think about. We certainly couldn't think about having a third child at the moment. I think what would put me off would be the childcare situation. I couldn't go back to the beginning after 6 and 7. My children first entered childcare 6 weeks and 6 months. So my daughter 6 months and then my son 6 weeks. So, that's 5 days a week for the last 6 or 7 years. And now it's oosh. It's
big expense as well.
It's incredibly expensive. We sent my daughter to school at 4, which is pretty normal in other countries, but I didn't realise at the time that wasn't necessarily the case in Australia, that not everybody sends their child to school at 4, but we had to do that because of the hours that myself and her father work, so that was right for us.
I think one of the things that's curious to me around this whole childcare argument is that it's always framed as a women's problem. And that really irritates me, because it's a family problem, and because it's a women's problem, it's not been given the resources in the past that it's probably needed. And the piece around childcare and why it's important is we're fundamentally underutilising, because it does usually fall to women, 50% of our intellectual resource in this country. So I think it's imperative that we get it fixed, and get it fixed pretty quickly, and make it affordable. I have a staff member who, when she comes to work and both of her kids are in childcare, she may as well not be at work. She comes to work because she loves working.
So she's working to pay for childcare.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a non-pay day when she has both of her kids at childcare, and it's not good enough.
Lots of questions, as you'd imagine, on today's Jobs Summit. Here's Jan Kivernick.
Hi.
Hi, Jan.
I'm a single mum with 4 kids, and I'm currently studying at uni. My question is to Katy Gallagher and to Catherine Marriott. It is, what are some of the incentives that the government would use to encourage more Australians into the workforce rather than bringing in migrants?
I'll go to you first on that, Catherine.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I think when we're looking at the workplace, I think I'm from agriculture, so that's my experience, and agriculture is an extremely diverse industry. We've got everything from tech, data analysts, fruit pickers, media. Like, it's a really diverse industry, and I think if we're going to understand this issue, we need to break it into blue collar and white collar, because I see that they actually need different things. So in the blue collar, to be clear, is trades which we need more and more of. They fundamentally underpin whether or not we can get food from the farms onto people's tables. And I think there's levers that we can pull around migration, but Rebecca Huntley did a report that recently showed that 3 out of 4 older Australians would like to come back into the workforce at least part-time. Their pension at the moment and the way that that's framed makes that very difficult. They can only work 12 hours a week, and the bureaucratic process of getting on and off the pension means that you disincentivise people who wanted to work. Why getting older Australians back into the workforce, if they are particularly keen to, is important. It also plays a role with their identity and their sense of purpose. They are safe with machinery, they're experienced, they're sensible, and they play a really crucial role. I think migration also plays a role. It's imperative that we look after those migrant workers when they come in.
Katy, Gallagher.
Yeah, so there's a few things and the summit's dealing with many of those issues, but we are also going to tomorrow morning talk about migration, and Australia has, of course, a very proud record about, under our immigration program of welcoming people to our country and helping to build up the economic prosperity that we've all enjoyed for many years now, decades now. So I think from the government's point of view, it's the priority is on making sure that we're training and skilling up Australians for the jobs that we need, and there's huge opportunities in a whole range of areas like the care economy, in digital and technology, in resources, in a whole range of areas where we've really got to lift our game in making sure that people feel able to undertake training. And the Prime Minister made some announcements about bringing forward some fee-free TAFE places. So that's a real incentive to get people into the courses that we need, and the states and territories are going to work with us on that. So part of the challenge of dealing, or the response to dealing with skill shortages, on the one hand, training opportunities, skilling opportunities for people here, and that goes to women, it goes to older workers, it goes to people with a disability, First Nations people from different cultural backgrounds that are new to the country, so meeting that through skilling our own people. But then there is the opportunity to balance our migration program to help deal with the skill shortages.
Does that mean increasing, though?
Exist.
160,000 capped at the moment, but what you're talking about is increasing that.
That's certainly the discussion that's underway at the summit, and we'll do that session tomorrow. But I know Minister O'Neill is working with the business community, unions, civil society about what is the right place to land that. I mean, obviously some groups want a lot of people to come in under that,
is
others
one
want less.
Yeah, 200. I'll bring Stuart Robert in, because 200,000 is one of the numbers that's been put around. Should it be increased?
It's a wrong discussion, Stan. There's 1.7 million visa holders in Australia right now. The 160,000 that become permanent migrants come out of that 1.7 million. So taking that 1.7 million and going from 160 to $200,000 doesn't have a net increase in people able to work. So it's the wrong conversation. The Grattan put out a piece of work yesterday that says it's the wrong conversation. The right conversation is, do we need to go from 1.7 up to 1.8, 1.9, 2 million visa holders? And then the number of people that become permanent migrants will just flow naturally from that. I think we do, because we're still a couple 100,000 short of where we were pre-pandemic. 15% of our entire hospitality workforce comes from visa holders. That's just the reality, as do a vast majority of workers on farms, as well as in business. And with unemployment at 3.4%, youth unemployment the lowest in our nation's history at 7%, there is scope for us to increase that migration.
That's not what Jan's saying. Why do you think, Jan, that... Yeah.
The unemployment rate, those figures, I believe, are wrong, because if you work, for example, if you just work 4 hours, I think it is, or 1 hour a week...
You're off the books, yeah.
You're off the books, okay? And that person could be casual, okay?
But the unemployment numbers are consistent.
No.
So it's been measured the same way for 30 years.
No, I don't agree. I've learnt about this at uni.
I know, it's just a statement of fact. They're the same for 30 years.
Yeah,
so
yes,
you can measure the trend.
yes, they are. But it's also true what Jan's saying, isn't it? You're very easy taken off the books.
And to Jan's point, what's happening to women who want to go back into the workforce in terms of assisting with children? So we speak so much about childcare and younger children, but what is actually happening for those who have older children who still need assistance and support, who want to go back and enter the workforce? What opportunities are available, and if they're off the books, then that middle ground needs to play out somewhere.
Jan, do you feel as if you're missing out somehow, that there's opportunities that you're not getting?
Probably, yes. Well, at the moment, I'm just doing casual. I'm doing Uber delivery driving, so while I'm studying at uni, so that's a help. But my concern, like I'd like to say now, my concern is for the future of my children being able to work. If you bring in these migrants, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would probably agree with me on this aspect, they've got kids of their own. What are your kids going to have as jobs if we bring in migrants every time there's a skills shortage?
Can I go to AC Grayling on this?
Why can't we just have those people go to TAFE and study? Like she said at the beginning, I agreed with her on that. That's good that you're giving free TAFE. Get those people skilled doing trades, because there's a trade shortage, there's a hospitality shortage, getting people working in that and skilling them up rather than bringing in the migrants.
We're going to get to trades as well. Anthony, this is something that you hear a lot, and you've heard it in your country, in the UK as well. Immigration becomes a real flashpoint issue. It's become an issue in Europe that's driven a lot of political change as well. When you listen to the conversation here, how do you strike that balance?
Well, first I should say that I feel a bit like somebody who's popped into the neighbour's house and found himself in the middle of a family quarrel, you know.
A polite quarrel.
A polite quarrel. So I wouldn't comment on the Australian situation, but you're quite right, there are parallels with the UK situation. Some people here may recall that the United Kingdom did an incredibly stupid thing a couple of years ago, which is to have this Brexit situation. And part of the motivation for that was because so many of our fellow Europeans had come to work and live in the UK, and it prompted that kind of anxiety about, immigrants putting a strain on the National Health Service and on the education service and welfare. And the truth of the matter is that immigrants bring net value. They put much more into an economy than they take out of it. They bring in diversity, they bring in new perspectives, they bring in... they're a good thing. And pretty well everywhere at the moment, and the UK is facing the same situation that Australia is, which is that we have a labour shortage. And astonishingly, this sort of pantomime which has been going on in the UK just recently of a couple of people trying to be even worse Prime Ministers than Boris Johnson have admitted the fact that this impact, the impact that Brexit has had, in losing us people in hospitality, in the health service, in education, in all those trades that were regarded as essential. You may remember during the pandemic, we were applauding people because they were key workers, they were essential. Now that they're all asking for higher wages, justifiably, and that they're now demonised, But it's because we did this very silly thing of excluding and becoming very unwelcome to migrants that we're in the situation that we're in the moment.
Just to hold that thought, Wendy, because we're going to stay on this topic.
Sure.
Khaled Ghanem.
Yeah. My question is that, how can skilled migrant get local experience if they are new in Australia? Same thing with, fresh graduate. I am skilled migrant engineer. I'm here in Australia for the last 10 years. I cannot get engineering job.
Wendy.
So I was born overseas. I was born in Lebanon. My parents came out here when I was quite young. And what happens with certain skill sets internationally is I find that we have so many migrants who come here with incredible skills that they can't put into action right away because some are not recognised, some need to start all over again, and they end up doing trades and jobs that they haven't studied for. And on top of that, there is a temporary feeling to a lot of the migrants that come here. And I think that if we were to work a little bit harder on processes in which people that come to this country and contribute to this country and spend in this country and give back to this country, that we have 330,000 people on temporary visas at the moment. There's a 500,000 shortage since pre-COVID. We've had 500,000 people leave our country. There's, on average, 2 million skilled migrants that work in this country, and we're 500,000 short at the moment. And that's a real problem. And every single small business is really feeling the pain of that. But we want to be able to upskill migrants in order to be able to, they work, they build up these skills, and then we tell them to leave.
I think we'd welcome you in agriculture if you're willing to come and live in the bush. It's a great lifestyle. We've got 170,000 jobs open at the moment across the agriculture supply chain. So we're desperate for, skilled trades, but as well skilled migrants, engineers, vets. Hamilton at the moment has one large animal vet. There's a shortage of vets. So not only are we short in the blue-collar industry, but the white-collar industry as well.
Khaled, you might have to move, Khaled. Is that the
just
answer?
like my question, is it like with local experience? If I don't have this word, I don't have local experience, and I am citizen. I'm now citizen, but still, because you don't have local experience in Australia, you are not engineer. Even like if you are, I did master degree in UTS.
So you went back and reskilled?
Yeah, I did master degree in UTS, and I did business administration advanced diploma also, but still I cannot get engineering job.
Where are you working now?
I'm working labor.
Yeah.
In fact.
And you cannot get away. Does it make you wonder about whether you should have come? Do you think that you question that decision?
Well, I came from poor country and I need money.
Stuart, Robert, I mean, this is encouraging people to go to rural areas, allowing people to bring their skills, and we have a skills shortage. What's failing here?
Couple of things, I think. Recognition of skills. So the various colleges or the various groups like Engineers Australia is responsible for recognising your engineering degree. So let's assume that's being recognised.
Yeah, sure, it's part of the assessment.
Yep, so that's assessment's done. So you're a fully qualified engineer. It's then for employers for you to apply for work and employers to take it up. Every employer wants great skills, outstanding motivation, great attitude. But of course...
Khaled's got that.
Absolutely.
It's not happening.
So I'm surprised engineering firms haven't fallen over backwards to pick you up in that respect. Because if you look at the highest participation rate in our nation's history for women and across the board, and the lowest level of unemployment for women and young people, as well as for normal Australians in 48 years, it is a very full labour market. And if there's people like Khaled, who's got an engineering degree as well as other qualifications... I am surprised employers aren't going, I'll have you and your mate.
Good luck. Good luck.
Like my thing, like when I came, like it was just 3 months after I finished my money, I went to the migration ministry in Adelaide and asked them, like, I cannot find job. I will go for working like labor. And they said, we give you visa to live in Australia, not to work. It's your choice to work or not as engineer.
Well, good luck, Khaled. Good luck. Let's hear now from Bailey Greathead.
With the huge skills and labour shortage that the trades are suffering from right now, how does the government plan to destigmatise trades as a second option or a lower form of education to university and incentivise more people to enter the trades through apprenticeships?
Katy.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. This has been a huge topic, not just today in the Job Summit, but for months beforehand, around the role of TAFE and the role of trades. I mean, when you look at the jobs of the future, if you just take electricians, for example, the world is electrifying. We are going to need so many electricians, thousands of electricians, and we need to train them up and give them, the skills, and then there's huge opportunities. But there has been sometimes this debate between, higher education in terms of universities and TAFE. But I think that is changing because the nature of work is changing, the skills that are required for the future are changing, and, in a sense, our investments into fee-free TAFE and investing back into public training is recognition of that. I mean,
but that doesn't deal with the question of pay right now, though, does it? And that's one of your issues, isn't it, Bailey, is what apprentices are being paid?
I don't think the pay is really too much of an issue. The issue I'm having now, I've just been through an apprenticeship. In terms of finishing your apprenticeship and then trying to upskill after, the issue I've found, the TAFEs aren't, they say they're providing the next courses down the road to advance your career, but they're not getting the people to run the course, or they're not having the teachers who are able to actually teach the course. And on top of that, the courses obviously cost an arm and a leg.
What about the stigmatisation? You mentioned that as well. Do people see that as lesser than going to university? Is that what you experience?
From my personal experience, yeah, I've personally experienced that I've been seen as lower than someone who's got a university degree, when in my trade of metal fabrication, I've seen tradesmen who are probably as intelligent or even more intelligent as people who are going to uni. They've just applied themselves to a different career.
Yep. Well, I don't know about you, Stuart, but I can barely change a light bulb, so I need people to do that for us.
Oh, we do. And the tradies are essential. The whole nation runs on it. Just look what happens if your toilet's blocked, and then tell me how essential a tradie is. When we finished, 110 days ago in government, there were 220,000 trade apprentices, the highest number in Australia's history, because we were backing that in. And I know the government is also walking down that path as well. Keeping in mind also that TAFE only does 20% of training in this country. Registered training organisations do 80% of that trade training, and they trade 79% of women. So don't forget the registered training organisations are non-TAFE providers. But you're right, we need to bring it further and further together. It's why we have a unique student identifier to bring the two across. It's why we're reforming the skills. We were, and I'm sure Katy's government will continue, the skills agenda, so that when you actually went and did units of competency, they could easily go for a trade or into university, and you could move in and out seamlessly. There shouldn't be vocational and higher ed. There should just be education, and you should be able to move seamlessly across that education spectrum.
Catherine Marriott, this is another thing you're looking for in the bush, isn't it?
Yeah.
Skilled, trained apprentices.
Yeah, absolutely. And it infuriates me beyond belief that tradies are seen as sort of second-class citizens. Two of my best mates, one's a landscape gardener and one's a builder, who've got more money than I could possibly even dream of. And they're, started off as a sparky and a gardener. My brother, like three of us have a degree, one of us doesn't. He's just as successful, if not more successful than the rest of us. So I don't know what it needs to take for Australia to wake up and drop the judgment around tradies, because if I had half the skills of a tradie, I'd go and do it. It's far better than sitting at a computer all day.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thanks for the question. Now, if you're just joining us, you're watching Q&A Live with AC Grayling, Wendy El-Khoury, Catherine Marriott, Stuart Robert and Katy Gallagher. And if you watched Four Corners earlier this week, you would have seen the story about mining exploration company Greywolf Resources. Now, a lot of people put their life savings into it and say that they've been stung. One of them was Lorraine Fitzjohn, who joins me now from Gallagher on the New South Wales Central Coast. Thanks for joining us, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Just take us through briefly what your experience here was with Greywolf.
Okay, so the story is that I was at work and I had the opportunity by some clients to be introduced to some shares to buy. It's the first time that we've actually bought shares before, and we looked into it, my husband and I. We actually even organised our own superannuation fund so that we could purchase these shares. We had our accountant look at them. We thought we'd done all the research, and so we bought them, and I wanted to share this opportunity with my family, and I shared it with everyone, and they also did their research, and we all put our money in, thinking it was a sure thing, and that they were going to be listed in 6 weeks or 12 weeks, and it kept on getting extended out by Edward. To longer and longer.
Lorraine, I'm sorry, can I ask you how much if you invested and what happened to that investment?
We personally put in all our superannuation that we had saved, and then added more into it, so around 100,000 personally, and but between myself and my family, about 180.
And you have a question for us as well.
I do have a question. I have a question for Stuart in regards to him having shares, and he was able to get the refund of his money. So, Stuart, I know at some point you bought shares and that you changed your mind and wanted a refund. How did that happen for you when we, as a family unit, all asked for our money back as well, and we didn't have that same opportunity as you? And the other thing is possibly maybe, as you know, ASIC, or we've all been to ASIC, we've all complained nothing's ever been done. And from the story the other night, we can see it's still happening. Is there anything that you could suggest that we could do to help us?
Let's go to the first part of the question. You'd bought shares, Stuart?
Yeah, I did. Look, thanks, Lorraine. And it's terrible what happened to you. I did buy shares. And when I became Assistant Treasurer in 2018, I was instructed to sell them. I had 5 days, so I wrote them off for zero gain. So I lost everything, the same as you, by the way.
So you purchased those 5 million shares, I understand. Is that the number?
No.
That's not the number?
Not at all. So I purchased shares. I wrote them off before coming into the ministry because I was instructed by the Prime Minister. And just out of interest, I informed ABC Four Corners of that before the show went to air. I note that part didn't go to air, and I'll just put that out there, Stan.
Well, Four Corners did include some statements from you.
It did,
and
but
one
it
of them
didn't
was
include that statement that the inference is...
you got your money back.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
You lost money?
It all. Yes,
you
I
lost
did.
money, did you?
Yes, all of it. Exactly the same circumstance as Lorraine has got. It's why I have great sympathy for what Lorraine's been through. They were written off completely.
So when you say written off, so in 2018...
Yes.
You divested those shares?
Yes.
And you received nothing?
Correct. I wrote them off and informed the company that had been written off.
And so you had purchased those shares, first of all, for how much?
I'm not going to disclose how much I buy my things for. I'm required to declare on the parliamentary register, which I have. In relation to Lorraine's question regarding ASIC, looking at it, I think they should. Because if Lorraine doesn't strike me as a professional investor under Section 708 of the Corporations Act, which meant that the company would have had to have an Australian Financial Services licence for dealing in securities for retail investors, if they didn't have that, well, that is a breach of the Corporations Act.
A couple of the questions that were raised is how close you were to the company and whether you provided any services
Not close
to the company
at all.
as well.
At all. Not close at all. Didn't do anything for them. Didn't visit their offices.
Were you aware that people like Lorraine and others were being caught up in this?
No, not at all.
As they say?
Not at all. Was not aware of any of the company's operations. I'm simply like Lorraine. Purchased shares and lost them all. It's that simple.
Lorraine?
Okay, I just thought it was something a little bit different to that. I understood you got a refund. But I am very interested to know how you might be able to help us move forward and maybe make this complaint, because, you know, we have lost a lot of money. There has been $7 million apparently in these businesses gone.
Lorraine, I think ASIC should investigate, because prima facie, you cannot deal in a security to a retail investor without having an Australian Financial Services licence that has retail investors, has generic product advice and has dealing in a security.
Would you be happy in the event of that investigation to have your involvement or your investment investigated, and also the allegations or the concerns that have been raised that you were close to the company and had performed services for the company? You'd be happy to assist in that investigation?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm an aggrieved shareholder like Lorraine.
Katy Gallagher, what can the government do here? Is this something you're going to be looking into?
Well, Lorraine, firstly, I'm really sorry to hear about your experience. When I had the Shadow Financial Services portfolio a few years ago in the lead up to the Banking Royal Commission, I'd heard stories like yours where significant amounts of money had been invested in what turned out to be dodgy arrangements where, you know, everyday Australians and their hard-earned money got lost, and they, you know, pretty much many lost everything. So I'm really, really sorry to hear about it. I hear from, I think, your remarks that you have made a complaint to ASIC. Then ASIC should, I hope, be able to respond to you. I know that the Assistant Treasurer has also sought briefings on this as well, and so the government is having a look at it. But ultimately, I think in the first instance, the regulator that you have complained to should be able to respond to you in some way to let you know what's happening.
Lorraine, I hope some of those answers have satisfied you or answered your questions. Good luck as well for the future as well with trying to recoup what you say you've lost here. Thank you, Lorraine. Let's move on to another topic now. It's a video from Jack Ling.
Has my beloved Labour Party caught the chronic timidity bug? Otherwise, why would they stick to the stage 3 tax cuts when everyone else, like the Tills, the Green, the El-Khoury, is for getting rid of it? Will Albo be remembered as our Casabianca at the battle of the $1 trillion debt? The boy stood on the burning deck when all but he had fled.
A wonderful question and such panache as well. What a performance. But the question is a serious one to you, Katy. How on earth can you justify a tax cut for the rich when we've heard people tonight say that they are going backward, they can't afford childcare? You've told us that you can't afford to bring forward the subsidy for childcare, but you can deliver a tax cut for the rich.
I thought you might come to me first on that one, Stan.
You are the finance minister.
I am. So I have a huge job ahead of me. In front of me right now, Jim and I are working through the budget that we inherited from...
Sorry, Katy, but you've committed to stage 3 tax cuts. They are going to be delivered.
Certainly, we had said before the election that we were not going to change the stage 3 tax cuts, and our position on that has not changed. We were clear at the point that they were debated in the Parliament. They are legislated. We lost the arguments in the Parliament, and our position on them hasn't changed. I would also say to you, though, that the tax cuts are due to come in July 2024. We are dealing with issues and cost of living pressures and the inflationary environment and wages and issues like that right now. And Jim and my attention is going on to what can we do right now to ease some of those
that,
pressures.
But if you can't afford to deal with the things...
Sorry, if I could just finish, Dan, and to work through, after 9 years of coalition government, exactly what the budget looks like going forward. I think it's entirely reasonable that a new government we've had 101 days, I think, to work through all of those issues, to take appropriate advice and be measured in how we respond to them. There is no doubt we have massive challenges facing us that we're not accommodated for in the budget, and we need to work through those. We've got a budget coming up in October where we're looking at making some savings and delivering on some of our election commitments, but our position on stage 3 has not changed.
No, and that means they're going to be delivered, which means that someone on $200,000 a year will be $9,000 better off. Who'd like to be $9,000 better off? Yeah. Who would rather see that money go towards things like childcare? How can you justify something that if someone's earning $200,000 a year is going to be $9,000 better off when we're seeing the struggle for people to keep their head above water and you can't deliver wage increases in line with inflation?
Is that back at me, Stan?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Well, I mean, my answer is the same to you, that we took a position on those tax cuts. We lost that in the Parliament. They were legislated. We made a commitment to the Australian people before the election around not changing the stage 3 tax cuts, and our position on those have not changed. That's not to say that we aren't looking at ways to make sure that we are putting in place sensible responses to people's cost of living pressures, but that has to happen in the next 2 years. The tax cuts in stage 3 are not going to come in until 2024. So we have to look at things that we can do right now. So that comes into the things we've discussed tonight about skills, about investing in childcare, about lowering the price of medicines, in doing all of those things, supporting wage claims of aged care workers and the rest of them that we've already done to ease some of those pressures on families now.
I want to come to Stuart in just a moment, but this is another thing that we've seen around the world, and you've written a lot about this, Anthony, and that is growing inequality and a sense that people are not paying what they should. How is that playing out internationally and the impact that's having on the health of democracy?
Well, it's very bad. It's very bad indeed. Growing inequality is very toxic in any society. It's very unjust. I mean, it seems to me extraordinary, actually, with very great respect for the situation here, that something which is obviously wrong, I mean, it's obviously wrong to give tax cuts to people who've got a lot of money and who would probably spend the money that they get from the tax cut on perhaps buying foreign goods or something, when the tax cut should be for lower income people. People on lower income should be taken out of the tax bracket if they can, so that the money they spend goes back into the economy itself. And the lessening of the gap between people who have and people who don't have is a good thing in society, because it promotes greater social solidarity. Inequality and growing inequality causes a very great deal of resentment. And as I say, it's very toxic. I think that the rise in populism that we've seen in recent years is a direct function of the fact that inequality in our world as a whole has been growing so rapidly. It's now out of hand.
Stuart, Robert, when this was your idea, your previous government's idea to reduce taxes.
Absolutely.
For the
We'll
rich.
always be the party of lower
that?
tax, Stan, and we won't apologise for being a party of smaller government and lower taxation.
For people earning $200,000 a year?
The intent of the tax cuts was designed to get from $45,000 to $200,000 in a single tax bracket, so that 95% of people will be paying no more than 30 cents in the dollar, which, by the way, brings it up to the level of corporations. Unless you're a small business, of course, it's at 25%. But we'll always be the party of aspiration and always the party of lower tax.
Ross Garnaut, the economist who has delivered a speech today, has said we're kidding ourselves. He has said that we have to increase the tax take. Wendy, do you think this is a time to increase taxes, or could you justify what we're going to see with the Stage 3 tax cuts?
For me, as a business owner, and for the business owners that I'm speaking on behalf of, we have a situation at the moment where I had a woman message me yesterday. She is a mother of two. Her youngest is 6 months old. She's put out a job ad for the past 6 months and had one applicant. She's taking the baby and putting the baby in the back of the store with one of her relatives or friends or whoever can sit with the child, so she can work at the front. And then the BAS statements come through and the tax comes through to these small business owners, and the front line, hospitality, retail, travel, tourism, the wedding industry and the event industry where I come from, have had 2 years of absolute hell. Their staff and their IP was basically moved on because they couldn't work. They were shut down. And so now we're in a position where we don't have staff. Our IP has left us 10, 15, 20 years, these employees that worked with us. On top of which, we have a situation where we're having conversations around tax, but we need to have a conversation around how we can keep these businesses open, because there are some businesses out there who are shutting their doors because it's cheaper to do that than to keep them open, and they're still having to pay taxes. And there's been no conversation around the aftermath of what the pandemic has meant for small business owners and how we can move forward. Rather than looking at it in a silo, we need to look at how the economy is actually functioning and how we can actually move forward as a country.
Katy Gallagher, that brings us to something that has also emerged out of the summit, and that is multi-employer bargaining that immediately Australian Industry Group CEO Ines Willox has said could shut down parts of the economy, could have an impact on small business, could see more industrial disputation. How do you justify that in an environment that we're facing right now?
So the discussion around bargaining, and I think you've seen in the recent days, COSBOA and the BCA working with the ACTU acknowledge that there are areas that we need to improve in relation to bargaining, and particularly bargaining in certain industries where the bargaining system isn't working and wages haven't been growing. And I would use the care economy as a classic example here, where we've got highly feminised industries, low paid. It's an area where we're going to have to attract more workers, and unless we fix some of these problems with the bargaining system so that there can be genuine bargaining, even at an industry level, to ensure that there's good simplicity for employers, but also the opportunity for workers to actually bargain and get the pay rises they need, we're going to have really big problems. I mean, we've got an ageing population. we need people to care for that ageing population. At the moment, we've got a system that isn't working for that workforce, and we're paying the consequences for it because workers are leaving the sector to go and work in other sectors where they're able to get better pay, and where bargaining works in those industries. So there's definitely a problem that needs to be fixed. I think we've made a little bit of progress at the summit over the last few days. We acknowledged that the summit wasn't going to have universal consensus, that every industry and business group wasn't necessarily going to even agree with each other, let alone with unions or NGOs. But I think, you know, the whole point of the summit was to bring people together, to start the conversation, where there's areas of consensus, to move on those, and where there's areas that there isn't consensus but there's an appetite for further discussion, that we move on those into another process. And that's, you know, the whole point of the summit. I think it's been incredibly successful today. I totally disagree with Stuart's comment that it's the, you know, whatever he said at the beginning of the show, the jibe he had at the beginning of the show. It's been a really productive day, and we've got day 2 tomorrow, but it's absolutely about dealing with some of the challenges that the panellists have been outlining tonight.
I said it was the most expensive press conference that the
Yeah, well, I
government's run.
disagree with you, Robert.
I know,
Like,
but...
we're dealing with the challenges you left us, frankly,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm surprised that you're even having a crack.
Shouldn't you have at least been at the table? Why did Peter Duffy set it out?
Well, I'm still reeling from the pattern bargaining we're going back to. You can give it a different name. You can put lipstick on this feral pig, but this is still 1970s pattern bargaining. That's what it is.
You did nothing for
and
9 years,
that's
Stuart.
what it will lead into.
That's why we're dealing with these problems right now. It's outrageous that you come on this show and pretend anything else.
It was a press conference today. It was designed to talk about pattern bargaining. It's the old-fashioned unionist coming back again, Katy. Call it what it is.
Yeah, well, you weren't there. You didn't see it. It was absolutely nothing like that. Absolutely nothing. I'm not going to take the rubbish from you. Not tonight.
Maybe tomorrow.
No, not tomorrow
Let's
either.
move on. We have another question from Bilal Muzaffar.
The COVID pandemic propelled us into the digital age, with work-from-home employees and digitally connected businesses emerging as a new reality. But many are struggling. I can see this every day when I walk around the streets of Parramatta at lunch. The government provided assistance like support payments and tax-related relief to them. But moving forward, should the government's role be to teach businesses and workers to better integrate to the digital economy and make them more self-reliant in battling current and future crises?
Catherine is itching to answer this question. I looked across and she was ready to jump out of the seat.
What a cracking question. Thank you so much. We in the bush, I tell you what, there was a telecommunications report done last year. You know, we're trying to innovate, we're trying to use tech, we've got a $100 billion target by 2030 that the National Farmers Federation has set, and yet we can't make a phone call in the paddock because there's no telecommunications infrastructure or very little. So if I could get one message out tonight, it would be that the government needs to invest in rural telecommunications because we fundamentally contribute an awful lot to GDP in Australia. We cannot...
What's it costing you at the moment? If you can't do those things, what the impact is actually having? How do people do business? Do they have to travel away? What is the impact?
Yeah, when I was living over in WA, I had to drive to the top of a hill to do video conferencing because I couldn't get it in my house.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I'm not a fancy economist, so I wouldn't be able to put a figure on it, but it's enormous, Stan. People are designing, there's a whole ag tech sector that's coming in, they're designing, Bluetooth-enabled stuff, and the technology's there. The private sector's willing to co-invest, but the government needs to come to the party and kind of help us.
So working from home isn't an option?
Working from home is, insanely... frustrating when you live in the bush. So, it's a great place to live. Come and live. Come and work with us. Just don't bring your mobile.
Also, Anthony, this is another fault line that we've seen around the world. People in rural areas feeling as if they're left behind. You mentioned before Brexit, and you said in your view it was a foolish decision. But if you have people who believe that they're not getting a fair go in their country, they believe that their country doesn't speak to them, that they believe they are left behind, that the urban areas get the bulk of resources. You see this division, and what impact is it having where you are, and how do we deal with this?
Well, that's right. I mean, there are certainly plenty of places around the world where you're getting this big divide, another big divide, this time between people who have access to all the technology. They're plugged into these communication systems. And then those people who are even more marginalised than before because they're left out of the loop. So, I mean, I sympathise with that. It's terribly difficult if you aren't part of that story. Of course, there will be a few people who will rush to join Catherine in the bush because they hate the technology that's around at the moment, and it will be very peaceful for them. But, you know, we're very fortunate. One of the few things that still works in the UK is the fact that you can pretty well get 4G or Wi-Fi pretty well everywhere, and that's a huge.
Are people
boom.
left behind, do you think, in rural areas?
Yes, certainly there are. I mean, there are certainly places that are in a blanket and you can't reach. So, for example, when we had to go online during the worst part of the pandemic, and all educational institutions like my own university, for example, had to move into Zoom, it meant that those students who didn't have access or didn't have the sort of up-to-date technology that they needed in order to be able to continue with their courses and to profit from it, immediately were excluded and left behind. So if we're going to have a digitalized world, and a world which is more and more reliant on these technologies, then those technologies have to be accessible to everybody. Otherwise, it's just another way in which swathes of people are left out of the story.
Yeah. Can I just jump in here? It's the difference between what used to be the literate and the illiterate in terms of being able to function online. That is actually the difference. And when it comes to small businesses, so many are reliant on social media in particular. One thing that I have called upon the government to do is to protect businesses from cyber attacks and from scams and from hacking. I get hundreds of messages weekly from businesses who are losing their Instagram accounts in particular, and there is absolutely nobody out there to help them. Every small business, or 95% of small businesses in this country, have a social media presence, and the more that they learn and the more that they grow, the more opportunity it does create. But also we need to be protected by our government, and we need to be able to upskill and encourage people and give them the facilities to be able to grow, because digitisation is the way of the future. And if you are left behind, it does create a gap, and it is a massive difference in being able to have that online conversation.
And that does lead us to our final question tonight to cap off the discussion. It comes from Brian Heath.
Hi, look, Australia's not the country I grew up in or left. Being back after 17 years, it seems that a fair go, an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, no longer rings true. Do you think people get a fair go in Australia anymore?
Where were you, Brian?
West Africa, Middle East, 5 years in Iraq and Baghdad. Better coverage in a war zone in 2005 than you get here in Australia. Haiti. Latin America,
and you came
telecoms
back and didn't recognise your own country. You're saying is that what you?
Yeah, and I can't get an interview, even though I'm an IT and telecom executive. I'm doing hospitality and construction to keep busy. Good, honest work, but it's not good use of my career.
Anthony, this is again to go back to the divisions we're seeing around the world. Is this sense that people don't recognise their country or don't feel as if their country recognises them? When did this start to happen? Why are people feeling this way?
Do you know, every phase in history is a phase of change. All societies everywhere, in every period, have been in transition. And the people who are at the front end of the transition, the people who are making the transition happen, the people who are at the very back end of the transition who are being left behind because, you know, all the new demands, all the new skills, all the new challenges are something that they sort of lag behind on, makes them feel as if they're being left out. And maybe sometimes they aren't, but in very many cases they are, because in a way it's as if our economic structure and the way that we organise our societies is a little bit insensitive to people, regards them as disposable. Well, you've had your time, you've had your chance, and now we're moving on.
Women,
younger people, and so on. So. You know, I think a reset is needed here in which we don't let people and all the talents and everything that they have to contribute are marginalised. We should make it possible for everybody to make the contribution that they would like to make, because the result would be a huge benefit. But just one final little point on that. I mean, just thinking about the daycare thing that we started on earlier about childcare. It's not only the fact that the working week, the working day is structured around men and the way men work from 9 to 5, which is completely, unhelpful to women with children, and therefore excluding all that talent from the economy and from the society. But it's also the fact that if you're going to make sure that people don't get left behind in that transition later on in life, give them the very, very best start at the beginning. Early education is hugely valuable from that point of view.
Well, the politicians have more than enough of a fair go, and they're going to have to fix the problem. So I'll finish just with Wendy and also Catherine. Is it still the land of a fair go? What do you say to someone who feels as if it doesn't speak to them, Catherine?
Yeah, look, I've travelled and lived in quite a few places as well, and I still think that Australia is, comparatively, we're very blessed to live here. I've lived and worked all throughout Southeast Asia and whatnot. But one thing that I would say is that I think we really need to sharpen our pencil from a leadership perspective, both politically and from a business perspective, because I think the fish rots from the head, and the minute that you bring ego or self-interest into an organisation, you drop your fiduciary duty, which is a fancy word for, the best for who you are serving. And you cannot continue to give people a fair go. So I think we need to drop ego and self-interest in leadership and actually start to listen to our constituents and find out what it is that they want and how we can better serve them.
I love Australia. I find myself very fortunate to be here compared to my relatives overseas. And I think on an individual level we give each other a fair go, but I think the way that the country is structured and the number of issues economically that we have and the number of external issues from the pandemic all the way through to the fires and the floods and other things that people have been through, people are really tired. And they just want to be given a fair go. And I think we need to, again, look at the leadership that we have and have the hope and the vision that we can go back to having that holistic view that Australia gives every person a fair go, not just us to each other, but the entire country's on the same page.
A message there for our politicians are taking away, and I saw so many heads nodding when Wendy said we're feeling tired, and we can certainly understand that. That's all we have time for. Thanks again to our panel: AC Grayling, Wendy El-Khoury, Catherine Marriott, Stuart Robert, and Katy Gallagher. Thank you. Big thank you to those of you here. Give yourselves a clap as well, and at home for driving the conversation, streaming us on iView. Next week we'll be live in Melbourne. Joining me to answer your questions, the man who brings Logan Roy to life in the hit TV series Succession. Yes, actor Brian Cox will be here, along with Kiwi singer-songwriter Marlon Williams, author and veterans advisor Catherine McGregor, and photojournalist and author Andrew Quilty. Please head to our website. You can register there to be in the audience. The details you can see there on your screen. We heard about the wonderful things about Australia. One of the great things is our music. Now for something absolutely special to close the show. A live performance from the Hoodoo Gurus, whose 40th, and Dave, are you feeling old? I'm feeling old because I was there when you started. 40th anniversary tour kicks off this month. They're performing their new song, Carry On. Take it away.
Thank you. We've got half the Hoodoo Gurus tonight, and of course, Beck Jensen and Juanita Tippins. 1, 2, 3, 4. I doubt myself sometimes, but I turned out alright. I cried myself to sleep, and more than once or twice. What a way to carry on! What a way to carry on! What a way to carry on! But carry on! Some folks are hard to please, they're never satisfied. Well, I'll do the best that I can. At least I'll know I tried. But if that isn't good enough, well, I'll kiss them goodbye. What a way to carry on. way to carry on. What a way to carry on. But carry on. Carry on. We don't shirk, we don't shout, and we get the business done. If they don't listen, we will still carry on. I doubt myself sometimes, but I turned out alright. Well, I'll take one on the chin, then I'll stand and fight. Yeah, I'll fight. What a way to carry on. What a way to carry on. What a way to carry on. But carry on.